The night shimmered with wealth. Hundreds of guests stepped out of black cars and into a marble-floored ballroom lit by golden chandeliers. Laughter echoed, diamonds sparkled, and every smile in the room carried the same quiet message. We belong here. And then a man walked in who made the entire space pause. A black man, tall, calm, impossibly composed. Wearing a sharp black tux that didn't scream for attention, it commanded it. He moved with a confidence the room didn't know what to do with. Some guests stared, others pretended not to. A few exchanged those familiar whispers, the ones people think you can't hear. Who invited him? Is he staff? He doesn't look like a donor. But the man didn't flinch. He simply scanned the ballroom, found his seat number printed in gold, and began walking toward the premium VIP table near the stage. A table reserved for the most powerful names in the company. But when he arrived, his seat was already taken. A white couple sat there, dressed like royalty, dripping arrogance as if it were perfume. They didn't look confused. They looked comfortable, like people who were used to taking whatever they wanted. The man smiled politely. I believe this seat belongs to me. The husband didn't even fully look up. He waved him off with 2 fingers, the way someone dismisses a waiter. Tables up front are for executives only. Staff sits in the back. The wife added a small laugh, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting. These seats aren't for outsiders. A few nearby guests turned to watch. Some smirked. Others folded their arms, ready for a scene. A few shook their heads, not because they disagreed, but because a black man daring to speak made them uncomfortable. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't explain, didn't argue. He simply placed his engraved invitation card on the table, the one with his name in deep gold letters. The couple stared at it, then at him and laughed harder. Anyone can print one of those. He looked at them silently, steadily, with eyes that held a truth they did not recognize. Because what they didn't know would change everything. The gala swirled with elegance, violin music floating through the air, servers weaving between tables, and executives greeting each other with practiced smiles. But while everyone else blended into the glow of privilege, the black man who'd been pushed from his seat walked through the room with a quieter focus. His name was Marcus Hale, To most people here, he was a stranger, but to the future of this entire company, he was far more than that. Marcus paused near a row of tall windows overlooking the city skyline, letting the lights reflect in his dark, thoughtful eyes. He had spent his whole life looking into rooms like this, rooms where he was always seen before he was heard, judged before he was known, tested long before he was trusted. Even tonight, nothing had changed. Despite the tailored tux and invitation engraved with his name, people still glanced at him with the same old question in their eyes. What are you doing here? But Marcus had learned not to answer that question with words. He answered it with presence, with patience, with silence that unnerved people who relied on hierarchy to feel tall. He adjusted his cufflinks, subtle silver, a gift from his mother who once worked as a hotel janitor. She used to clean rooms like this, where people stepped around her without ever seeing her. Her voice echoed in his memory. Baby, you don't fight for a seat at their table. You build your own, and one day they'll ask permission to sit with you. He had lived his life proving her right. But the wound of being dismissed, of being underestimated, never fully faded. Even now, he felt it, in the way some couples leaned away as he walked past, in the way security eyed him longer than others, in the way whispers trailed behind him like shadows. Still, Marcus stayed calm. Tonight wasn't just any gala. It wasn't an event he stumbled into. It was his first public appearance since finalizing a major acquisition, a quiet takeover of the very corporation sponsoring this glamorous evening. The deal wasn't public yet. The announcement was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Which meant that nearly everyone in this room, including the white couple who claimed his seat, worked for him without knowing it. But Marcus didn't care about the power. He cared about the truth. He wanted to see people when they didn't know they were being seen. So when Richard and Evelyn Dalton, wealthy, polished, and openly entitled, refused to move from his seat and told him he belonged in the back, Marcus didn't argue. He simply walked away. Not because they were right. Not because he was afraid. But because he wanted to see what this room looked like when it thought he was powerless. As he moved farther into the crowd, a woman watched him, Maya James ***, mid-30s, a rising manager at the company. Her expression held something different, anger mixed with a familiar ache. Maya had been here before. She had felt the stinging burn of disrespect, the quiet humiliation of being spoken down to, the fear of being labeled emotional for defending herself. She had watched the Daltons treat others like this more times than she could count. She had stayed silent, too afraid of retaliation, too aware of how quickly a black woman could be branded difficult. But watching Marcus stand alone in that moment, her chest tightened. She took a step toward him, then hesitated. Her voice trembled inside her. If I speak up, they'll come for me next. So she stayed where she was, guilt heavy in her throat. Across the room, the Daltons continued laughing at their table like nothing had happened. Richard bragged about quarterly numbers, about how he practically ran the division. Evelyn leaned in, complaining about diversity hires and unqualified people taking up space. Marcus heard it all not because they were loud, but because he had lived this soundtrack since childhood. He moved toward a quieter corner, giving himself a moment. The weight of the evening pressed against him, not like a burden, but like a familiar test. Every achievement in his life had come with a moment like this. A moment where he had to decide whether to fight back or let the truth reveal itself. He inhaled slowly, steady. He chose the truth. At a nearby table, a small group of junior employees whispered about him. Is he someone important? No idea, looks out of place. Probably crashed the gala. Marcus let their assumptions slide off him like water. His strength was built from years of being misjudged. He found an empty chair at a quiet table and sat down calmly, the only guest seated alone. Heads turned, eyebrows lifted, some people laughed under their breath. To them, he looked like a man who had been embarrassed. But Marcus wasn't embarrassed. Marcus was observant. He watched how people interacted. Who was kind to servers. Who snapped their fingers at them. Who pretended to be generous but treated staff like furniture. He watched the Daltons most closely. Their confidence, their entitlement, their absolute surety that they owned this room. He had seen men like them in boardrooms, in banks, in classrooms. Men who believed the world belonged to them, and anyone who didn't look like them was trespassing. A server approached Marcus timidly. Sir, the general guest section is actually. Marcus smiled kindly. I'm fine right here. The server froze, unsure if he should insist. Marcus's calm tone made him step back. Maya watched the interaction from a distance, her heart breaking a little. She could feel that he didn't belong alone. She could feel that he deserved more respect than the entire room was giving him. But Maya also knew something else, something she had learned the hard way. People reveal who they are when they think no one important is watching. Tonight, Marcus Hale was watching everyone. And the Daltons were about to regret every second. Because the man they humiliated, the man they dismissed, the man they pushed from his own seat, was the one person they should never have crossed. Marcus folded his hands, breathed deeply, and waited for the evening to unfold. Whatever happened next, he was ready. The moment the conflict erupts, the humiliation deepens, the injustice becomes visible. The gala's host walked onto the stage, welcoming everyone with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to rooms filled with power. Applause echoed politely. Crystal glasses chimed. Laughter drifted through the tables. But Marcus wasn't listening. His attention sharpened on the couple who had refused to give him his seat, Richard and Evelyn Dalton. They sat comfortably, completely unaware that the man they had mocked was watching them from only a few feet away. Their table was the center of attention. Executives leaned in to greet them. Investors shook Richard's hand. Evelyn glowed in the flattery. They thrived in the belief that they belonged at the top. Marcus watched them with no anger in his eyes, only clarity. If tonight was a test of this company's culture, the Daltons were already failing. A moment later, Richard snapped his fingers at a server, loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Water," he ordered, not even looking up. The server hurried, trembling slightly. Evelyn narrowed her eyes at the poor young woman carrying a tray. "Careful," she whispered loudly. "These gowns cost more than your salary." Marcus exhaled slowly, not in annoyance, in recognition. He had seen people like this his whole life. People who believed kindness was optional, because cruelty had always rewarded them. Maya watched from across the room. Every word the Dalton said, every gesture, every dismissive look, she felt it all like a bruise forming under her skin. She kept glancing at Marcus. Who was he? Why was he so calm? Why did she sense something different about him, something grounded, something powerful? She saw the tiny flicker of disappointment in his eyes each time someone treated him like he didn't belong. That flicker resonated with her, because she'd felt it thousands of times herself. She hesitated for a long time, then finally gathered the courage to move. She walked toward Marcus's table and took the seat beside him. He looked up and met her eyes. "May I?" she asked softly. His nod was gentle, grateful. For a moment they both sat quietly, watching the room swirl with privilege. "I saw what happened," Maya said finally, her voice low, "with your seat." Marcus gave a faint, knowing smile. "I figured you did." "I wanted to say something," she confessed. "But you know how it is, people like them, people like us." Marcus finished for her, "If you speak, you're the problem." Her chest tightened, he understood. Before she could respond, Richard's voice cut across the ballroom. Loud, sharp, commanding. "Security." Heads turned, conversations paused. In seconds, a young security supervisor hurried to the Daltons' table. Evelyn pointed at Marcus without hesitation. "That man is sitting where he shouldn't. He's not supposed to be here." Her voice carried across the room, slicing the air. A murmur spread through the tables. Marcus stayed still. The security supervisor's eyes narrowed as he marched straight toward Marcus's table. He didn't ask questions, didn't check the seating chart, didn't verify anything. He just saw a black man sitting alone, and assumed trouble. Maya's pulse quickened. She whispered urgently, "Do you want me to say something? I can tell him." Marcus placed a calm hand over hers. "No," he said, "not yet." Security stopped in front of Marcus with a stiff, authoritative stance. "Sir, you're creating a disturbance. I need you to move to the general guest section." Marcus looked up at him, voice steady. "I'm not creating a disturbance. I'm sitting where I'm assigned." Security's jaw tightened. "This table isn't assigned to you." "It is." Richard overheard and stood, raising his voice again. "He's lying. I told you he doesn't belong here. Get him moved before this becomes an issue." Gasps flickered around the room as people sensed drama. Marcus didn't stand, didn't flinch. He simply opened his jacket, pulled out his engraved invitation, and handed it to security. The supervisor barely glanced at it. "This doesn't mean anything," he muttered. Maya stood abruptly, unable to stay silent anymore. "That's a premium-level invitation card," she said sharply. "It has his name on it." Richard laughed. "Sweetheart, stay out of this. You don't know anything about premium access." Maya's eyes blazed, but Marcus leaned slightly toward her, whispering, "Let it play out." Richard walked closer, staring down at Marcus with smug confidence. "Do you know how these events work? People like us get these seats, people like you don't." Marcus met his stare with calm, unwavering strength. "And what kind of people are you, Mr. Dalton?" Richard smirked, thinking he'd won. "The kind that built this company." Marcus paused, not because he was hurt, but because the irony was so deep it almost felt poetic. Before Marcus could respond, the event host noticed the commotion and called for Mrs. Kensington, the head of the Gala organization. A revered woman with decades of experience, someone who could sweep problems away with a single gesture. She arrived quickly, elegant, composed, recognizing instantly that this was a situation she needed to control before it escalated. Richard immediately switched to his rehearsed, polite smile. Mrs. Kensington, he said warmly, we have an uninvited guest sitting in a VIP seat. Evelyn added, we're just trying to keep the event orderly. Maya's jaw clenched. The audacity burned inside her. Mrs. Kensington turned to Marcus politely. May I see your invitation, sir? He handed it to her without hesitation. As she read the name Marcus Hale *, her expression changed. Not dramatically, but subtly. A flicker of recognition. A tightening around her eyes. A slight shift in posture. She knew something the others didn't. She took a slow breath, then said carefully, Sir, may I speak with you privately? The entire room froze. The Daltons were stunned. Privately, Evelyn hissed, why privately? Richard leaned forward, suddenly suspicious. Is there a problem? Mrs. Kensington smiled tightly. No problem at all, just a matter we need to verify. She looked at Marcus with respect, real respect, and gestured toward the side hall. Marcus rose gracefully. Before he followed her, he looked at Maya. I'll be right back. Maya nodded, confusion and curiosity swirling together. The Daltons watched him walk away with growing unease. Richard muttered, what the hell is going on? Evelyn's fingers dug into her napkin. I don't know, but I don't like it. As Marcus disappeared behind the curtain with the CEO of the Gala. The room had no idea that the truth was beginning its slow, unstoppable climb to the surface. And the people who had humiliated him were standing on the edge of a cliff they couldn't see. The truth edges closer, the humiliation multiplies, the turn begins. The side hallway was quieter, dimly lit, lined with portraits of philanthropists and leaders from past galas. Far from the clinking glasses and gossiping guests, the air felt heavier, more intentional. Mrs. Kensington walked with an urgency she tried to hide. Her heels clicked fast against the marble floor, but her voice softened when she finally turned to Marcus. Mr. Hale, she began, I need to confirm something with you. Marcus nodded calmly. I understand. She held up his engraved invitation, running her finger over the gold lettering like it might unlock a secret. This card, it's not part of our standard printing, and the name, she paused, studying him more closely, Marcus Hale. Are you the same Marcus Hale who? He answered before she finished. Yes. Her breath caught. All the pieces in her mind clicked at once. The acquisition, the confidential board meetings, the executive memos marked eyes only, the private dossier that mentioned a new owner, a man who preferred anonymity, who kept his leadership quiet until he could assess internal culture himself. A man named Marcus Hale, **. And now he was here, being shoved from his own seat. Mrs. Kensington closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them, her expression had changed completely, from cautious politeness to profound respect. Mr. Hale, she whispered, I had no idea you would be attending tonight. I wanted to observe everything quietly, Marcus replied. Without titles, without introductions, without barriers. Her throat tightened. She knew what he meant by barriers. Sir, she said carefully, if you want me to correct this immediately, I can make an announcement. I can. Marcus lifted a hand gently. No, not yet. She hesitated. But those people. I know, he said softly. I saw. And the security supervisor. I saw him too. And the comments. I heard everything. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He was simply tired. Mrs. Kensington exhaled slowly. Then what would you like me to do? Marcus looked toward the ballroom through the crack in the curtain. He saw the Daltons laughing again, recounting the seat incident to amused colleagues. He saw Maya standing alone near the far wall, a storm of emotions behind her controlled expression. He saw a room full of people revealing themselves. I'd like the evening to continue as naturally as possible, he said. And tomorrow, I'll address everything at once. Mrs. Kensington nodded. She understood the significance. Marcus wasn't just looking for an apology. He was evaluating the entire leadership culture of the company he now owned. "Very well," she said, "but I'd like to move you to your original seat." Marcus shook his head. "No need, leave them there." Her brows rose. "You're sure?" "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I want to see what people do next without interference." It was the kind of calm power that didn't need proving. The kind of strength that comes from knowing who you are. Mrs. Kensington bowed her head slightly. "I will honor your request, but one more thing." She handed him back his card with both hands, a gesture of respect. "If anyone here deserves the front table," she said quietly, "it's you, Mr. Hale, more than anyone." Marcus gave her a warm but weary smile. "Thank you." As they walked back toward the ballroom curtains, Marcus paused. "One more favor," he said. "Anything." "When the time is right," he said, "introduce me, but not as a guest, as the man they work for." Mrs. Kensington nodded with solemn understanding. "Consider it done." Meanwhile, at the main table, the Daltons were still holding court. "I swear," Richard said, "these events get more chaotic every year. You'd think they'd check who they let in." Evelyn sipped her champagne delicately. "It's a shame," she said, "that some people don't know their place." The group around them chuckled. Some uncomfortably, some eagerly, some already tipsy enough to laugh at anything dripping with cruelty. One man asked, who was he anyway? Richard shrugged. "No idea. Probably someone who got in with a spare pass or begged a server for access." Evelyn added, "Certainly not someone from our level." Their confidence was unshakable because no one had ever challenged it. But that was about to change. Maya, still shaken, watched the Daltons from a distance. She felt a conflict raging inside her, guilt for not speaking sooner, fury at the way they treated Marcus, and curiosity about who he truly was. She replayed the security confrontation in her mind. His calmness, his silence, his assurance, his eyes that seemed to see right through people. Something in her said, "He's not just anyone." But she didn't know how right she was. When Marcus returned to the ballroom, whispers rippled around the room. Some wondered why the head of the gala had taken him aside. Others speculated that he was being removed. Some thought he was being questioned for trespassing. Marcus walked past them all with quiet confidence. He returned not to the front table, but to the empty one in the corner. The one where no one else wanted to sit. That choice alone confused everyone. Why would someone who clearly commanded respect from Mrs. Kensington choose to sit alone? Why would he accept humiliation with such grace? Why hadn't he demanded justice? Because Marcus wasn't playing the short game tonight. He was playing the truth game. And truth is slow, but devastating. Maya approached him again when he sat. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Marcus smiled gently. "Are you?" Maya inhaled shakily. "The way they spoke to you, the way security treated you, it wasn't right." "No," Marcus agreed, "it was." "So why didn't you push back?" Marcus looked toward the Daltons. "Because people reveal themselves when no one stops them." Maya swallowed. "That's painfully true." "And besides," he said quietly, "I won't need to say anything, not tonight." "Why not?" He didn't answer directly. He just gave her a look, calm, knowing, almost sad. "The time will come," he said. "And when it does, everyone will understand." Maya didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But she felt it, a shift in the air. A quiet storm building. One that wasn't loud. Or angry. Or explosive. One that moved like Marcus himself, patient, controlled, inevitable. At the Daltons' table, a board member whispered something that made Evelyn freeze. "Did you hear? The company was acquired last week." Richard looked up sharply. "What, by who?" "No announcement yet. It's confidential, but apparently the new owner is attending the gala tonight." A chill slid down Evelyn's spine. Richard forced a laugh, but it shook. "There's no way." He turned around, scanning the room. His eyes landed on Marcus. Marcus didn't look away. He didn't smile, didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply held Richard's gaze with quiet, unimaginable power. A power that Richard suddenly, desperately, hoped wasn't real. Maya watched the exchange, her breath catching. Something was happening. Something big. And the night was far from over. The night unravels, masks slip, tensions rise, and the truth begins to surface. The music shifted to something slower, more elegant, a signal that the formal program was about to start. The chandelier lights dimmed to a warm gold glow, and servers re-entered the ballroom carrying trays of sparkling drinks. From his solitary table at the far corner, Marcus watched everything with an almost unsettling calm. He didn't fidget, didn't complain, didn't glance at his phone like everyone else. He simply observed every interaction, every whisper, every sideways glance directed at him. People behaved differently when they thought no one important was watching. That alone was the reason he had come, without revealing his identity. Across the room, Maya found herself glancing at Marcus far more often than she intended. She couldn't help it, the unfairness of what happened still burned in her chest. But something else accompanied that anger now. A growing curiosity. A feeling that she was standing at the edge of a secret she wasn't supposed to discover yet. The energy in the gala felt like a held breath. Everyone was waiting for something, they just didn't know what. Richard Dalton's grip on his champagne flute began to tighten. He couldn't shake the unease that crawled beneath his skin. His earlier confidence, his smug assurance that Marcus was nobody, was shifting into something else. A board member's words kept echoing in his head. A new owner. Present tonight. Anonymous. He looked again toward the corner table. Marcus sat with perfect poise, posture straight, expression unreadable. There was something about the way he carried himself that mocked the entire idea of knowing your place, something that made Richard's stomach twist. "Evelyn," he murmured, leaning slightly toward his wife, "don't look now, but—" Evelyn turned anyway. Her eyes locked onto Marcus. Calm, alone, untouched by their mockery. Her throat tightened. "Richard," she whispered, "that man, he didn't argue, he didn't defend himself, he just watched us." Richard nodded. "That's what scares me." "For heaven's sake, stop being paranoid," Evelyn said, but her voice quivered. "The man was sitting in our seats." "And he didn't care," Richard said. "That's what I can't figure out." Evelyn forced a laugh, but it cracked like thin glass. "We're overthinking this. He's probably some guest Mrs. Kensington needed to escort for courtesy." Richard shook his head slowly. No escort in the world gets pulled aside like asterisk that. And no escort sits like a man who's waiting for everyone else to expose themselves. Evelyn swallowed. For the first time tonight, she felt genuinely afraid. Maya approached the drink station, still feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Her hands trembled slightly as she filled a glass of water for herself. "Rough night," a familiar voice teased lightly. She turned, it was Liam, another waiter on the evening shift. Funny, sarcastic, always trying to lighten any room he entered. "You could say that," Maya said, letting out a shaky breath. "Hey," he added more gently, "you okay? I saw the way those people spoke to that guy. That was messed up." Maya nodded. "It was worse in person." "What do you mean?" She looked toward Marcus. He didn't just get disrespected. He got erased, like they couldn't even believe a man like him belonged here. Liam followed her gaze. "Whoever he is, he handled it better than I would." "He shouldn't have had to," Maya murmured. Then, lowering her voice, "Something about him doesn't add up, but in a good way." Liam laughed. "You think he's, what, some kind of undercover millionaire spying on rude rich people?" Maya didn't laugh back. "That's the problem," she said quietly. "I don't think anything anymore. I know asterisk something is off, I just don't know what." On the opposite end of the ballroom, Mrs. Kensington was moving swiftly between tables, adjusting minor details, checking that the lighting crew was on schedule. But her mind was elsewhere. Every time she glanced in Marcus's direction, the weight of what she knew pressed harder on her chest. A man who owns everything in this room. Being treated like he owns nothing. She clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to march to the stage and reveal the truth immediately. But Marcus had asked for patience, and she had promised. Still, her eyes narrowed every time she caught pieces of whispered laughter or saw the Daltons bragging about how they put a man in his place. The ignorance was suffocating. She approached the tech booth near the stage. "Is the microphone ready?" she asked. The sound technician nodded. "All set. And the intro cards?" "Right here." She exhaled. Soon everyone would know exactly who they had humiliated. But as the night dragged on, things got worse. Not for Marcus. For the people who underestimated him. It happened at the silent auction table. Marcus approached it quietly, examining the items, art pieces, charity vouchers, luxury experiences. A woman standing nearby glanced at him and immediately pulled her purse closer. Then she stepped slightly away, whispering to her partner, "Do you think he can afford anything here?" Marcus pretended not to hear. He kept scanning the items. His eyes landed on a framed portrait. A painting titled *Horizon of Hope. The bid price was already high. Marcus reached for the digital bidding tablet. But before he could touch it, a man's voice said sharply, "Sir, the volunteer booths are at the back." Marcus looked up calmly. The man stiffened. "Oh, sorry," he corrected, clearly not sorry at all. "I thought you were part of the staff." Marcus didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't correct him. He simply stepped aside. The onlookers smirked, whispered, judged. And every one of them would later wish they hadn't. Back at the corner table, Marcus finally took a sip of water. He didn't touch the wine, didn't eat the appetizers. Every movement he made was deliberate, composed. Maya, passing by with a tray of new glasses, paused. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked softly. Marcus shook his head. "No, thank you." She hesitated. "You sure you haven't eaten?" Marcus smiled slightly. "I'm used to waiting." Maya felt something tighten in her chest. "Waiting for what?" "For people to show me who they really are," he said. And again, there was that calm power, that quiet truth that didn't require volume to be felt. Maya swallowed. "Who are you?" Marcus looked at her for a long, heavy moment. "A man who doesn't need a seat at their table," he said, "to own the building it sits in." Maya blinked. Her heart stumbled. "What does that?" But before she finished, Mrs. Kensington approached the stage. The room shifted. The soft music died down. Lights brightened. Conversations dimmed into whispers. And suddenly, everyone in the ballroom turned their attention forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Kensington announced, her voice firm and elegant, "thank you for joining us. Tonight, we have the honor of being accompanied by someone very special." Richard stiffened. Evelyn went pale. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Maya's heartbeat quickened. She subtly turned her head toward the corner table. Marcus sat perfectly still, unmoved, prepared. Mrs. Kensington continued, "A man whose presence here tonight marks the beginning of a new era for our organization." Whispers broke out. Guests leaned forward. The Daltons stared at each other, dread crawling up their spines. A new era. New leadership. New owners. "And I would like," Mrs. Kensington said, her voice rising slightly, "to formally acknowledge him." She turned toward the corner table. Every head followed. Every breath held. Every assumption cracked. "Please join me," she said, "in welcoming." Evelyn grabbed Richard's hand. Maya felt her heart leap to her throat. Marcus lifted his chin slightly. "Calm. Ready. Silent. Mr. Marcus Hale." The ballroom froze. The world itself seemed to stop. 1,000 realizations hit at once. The man in the wrong seat. The man who didn't argue. The man they treated like nothing. He wasn't a nobody. He wasn't even an equal. He was the man above every single person in that room. And the rising action had only just begun. For a full 5 seconds, nobody in the ballroom reacted. They just stared, and in that long, breathless silence, a single truth passed through everyone's mind. We made a mistake. A terrible one. Richard Dalton's jaw dropped first. Then Evelyn's fingers slowly slipped from her champagne glass, the stem clicking against the table as her hand trembled uncontrollably. She wasn't breathing, not properly, not after hearing the name Marcus Hale. She whispered it again under her breath, like a confession. "Oh my God, that's him." Richard shook his head violently. "No, no, no, this must be some publicity stunt. That man he can't." But his voice betrayed him. Every board member at the table looked just as shaken. They knew the name, too. Everyone did. Marcus Hale was the most elusive figure in the company's history, a genius investor, a silent force, someone who had risen from nothing and bought the company piece by piece until he owned it outright. But he never appeared at galas, never attended award ceremonies, never showed his face. Until now. And they had humiliated him. Maya felt her entire heartbeat change rhythm. She stared across the ballroom at Marcus still sitting in the shadows, unmoved by the shock surrounding him. He didn't even look proud. He looked resolved, like a man who had expected this moment, and expected people to show exactly who they were before it arrived. The audience erupted into whispers. "That's him." He was sitting alone in the corner. He looked so normal. Why didn't he say anything? The Daltons took his seat, did they know? Oh, this is bad, really bad. But the one voice that cut through everything was Mrs. Kensington's. She stepped aside from the podium, eyes full of something between pride and relief. "Mr. Hale," she said, "the stage is yours." Marcus finally stood. Slowly, elegantly, and somehow the act of standing itself felt like a shift in gravity, as if the ballroom's weight redistributed itself around him, acknowledging a truth that had been denied all night. He walked toward the stage with quiet steps, each one echoing loudly in the minds of the people who had wronged him. As he passed the tables, conversations died instantly. People straightened nervously. Some tried to smile. Some avoided eye contact. Some lowered their heads. Richard and Evelyn sat frozen. Richard's lips twitched like he wanted to speak, apologize, or simply disappear, but nothing came out. As Marcus drew closer to their table, Evelyn instinctively reached out, her voice barely a breath. "Yes, sir, we didn't know." Marcus stopped walking. He didn't turn. He didn't respond. He simply continued forward. That silence was worse than any confrontation. Worse than anger. Worse than humiliation. It was a truth. Your apology was never for me, it was for yourselves. Maya watched the entire room shift, its hierarchy, its entitlement, its illusions, all collapsing quietly beneath the weight of who Marcus truly was. When he reached the steps of the stage, Maya felt something unfamiliar rise inside her. Pride, not because of his wealth or his title, but because he had walked through a room full of people who thought they were better than him, and he never lowered himself to prove them wrong. He let the truth do that for him. Marcus reached the podium. The lights framed him. The ballroom waited, breathless, desperate, terrified of what he might say. He rested his hands on the wooden sides of the podium, scanning the room with steady, unreadable eyes. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vengeful. He looked disappointed. "Good evening," he said softly. His voice was calm, controlled. It carried without force. The room simply leaned in to hear him. "I wasn't planning to take the stage tonight. My original intention was to observe." Every executive shifted uncomfortably. "But sometimes," Marcus continued, "silence reveals more truth than words." A ripple of unease passed through the room. People knew exactly what he meant, and exactly who he meant. "My name is Marcus Hale," he said, "and as of last quarter, I am indeed the new owner of this company." More whispers, more panic. Some people stared at the door, as if escape was still an option. Marcus let them murmur for a moment, then added, "And tonight I chose not to arrive with an entourage, not with a title, not with an announcement." He paused. "I came as a man." A few heads lowered. "I learned something valuable," he continued. "The real character of a room is exposed when its people believe no one important is watching." Those words struck like stones. Richard felt them hit the hardest. Marcus's eyes scanned the crowd, slow, deliberate, letting the tension settle like dust on every guilty soul. "What I witnessed," he said, "was not simple disrespect." Richard closed his eyes. It was entitlement. Evelyn swallowed hard. It was arrogance. A few board members stiffened. It was judgment based not on actions, not on merit, but appearance. The entire front half of the ballroom fell silent. "And while I carry no anger," he added, "I do carry awareness." That line sent a chill through every executive in the room. Maya breathed out slowly. He wasn't attacking them. He was exposing them. Marcus stepped slightly back from the podium, his posture calm but commanding. "I don't believe in punishing people in the dark," he said, "so I won't call names, I won't embarrass anyone publicly." An exhale. A flicker of relief swept the tables. "But," he added sharply, "I will hold people accountable in the light." That relief vanished instantly. Richard sat straighter. Evelyn's pulse hammered visibly in her neck. The board members exchanged terrified glances. Everyone knew what accountability meant. Not tonight. Not in front of cameras. Tomorrow. But Marcus wasn't finished. He returned to the microphone. "And before I continue with tonight's donations and awards," he said, "I want to acknowledge someone in this room." Heads turned, scanning for some other VIP. Marcus looked to the far corner. Maya froze. "I would like to recognize," he said, "the only person who showed basic humanity this evening." Maya's eyes widened. "He can't mean Miss Maya Thompson." Every head in the room snapped toward her. Her hands went weak, her throat closed. She felt suddenly exposed, standing with her drink tray tucked against her ribs. A waiter's. A nobody. A girl guests pushed past without seeing. And the owner of the entire company was calling her out for kindness. Marcus continued, "You treated me with dignity before you knew who I was, and that," he said, "speaks louder than everything else I witnessed tonight." Maya's eyes stung. She forced them down, but her voice cracked quietly. "Thank you." Marcus nodded once, a gesture of genuine respect. And for the first time all night, Maya felt seen. Behind her, the Daltons sat drowned in humiliation. Richard whispered harshly to Evelyn, "He's doing this on purpose. He's punishing us." Evelyn shook her head. "No, this is worse." "What do you mean?" "He's not punishing us," she whispered. "He's teaching everyone what we are." Richard's heart dropped. Because she was right. Marcus wasn't attacking them. He was letting the entire room decide what to think. And the room had already made its decision. When Marcus finished his short address, he stepped back from the podium, but the tension remained. The ballroom had been cracked open from the inside. Masks broken, facades exposed, truth hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. The Daltons were drowning in dread. Board members whispered frantically. Guests shifted in their seats, suddenly aware of their own actions. Meanwhile, Marcus walked calmly down the stage steps. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just a man who saw everything. And the climax was now inevitable. The truth drops, the room flips, and the Daltons face the moment they've been running from all night. The applause that followed Marcus's speech was hesitant, scattered at first, then forced, then fading into an uneasy hush. No one knew whether to celebrate or fear what came next. Marcus didn't return to his lonely corner table. Instead, he walked calmly toward the center of the room, where servers were refilling water glasses and resetting silverware. He paused beside Maya as she placed a fresh napkin at an empty chair. Maya looked up slowly. "You didn't have to say my name," I did, Marcus replied. His voice carried warmth now, a subtle softness she hadn't heard earlier. Truth deserves to be acknowledged. Maya swallowed, trying to breathe steadily. You really saw everything. People show you who they are when they think you're beneath them, he said quietly. Tonight was nothing new. Before she could respond, a voice approached from behind, trembling, desperate. Mr. Hale. Richard. His tone was completely different now. The arrogance had evaporated. His chest rose and fell with shallow, anxious breaths. Marcus turned his head slightly, but didn't fully face him. Mr. Dalton. The name dropped like a stone in a silent lake. Even people at the next table froze. Richard attempted a stiff smile, the kind made by someone cornered. About earlier, he stammered. I think there was a misunderstanding. Marcus watched him, unblinking. I'm listening. Richard's throat bobbed with a hard swallow. We had no idea who you were. And that, Marcus said calmly, is the problem. Richard's face crumpled. Sir, I didn't mean, my wife didn't mean. Your wife, Marcus interrupted softly, told me the seats weren't for outsiders. Evelyn, who had been hovering 3 steps back, stiffened like she'd been slapped. Mr. Hale, I was referring to people like me, Marcus finished. Evelyn's lips parted. Her chest tightened. Tears almost surfaced, not of remorse but fear. What I meant was, doesn't matter what you meant asterisk, Marcus said. It matters what you said. They were out in the open now. The ballroom knew. Everyone was listening. Mrs. Kensington watched the confrontation from across the room, her pulse hammered with a mix of pride and dread. She had warned the board countless times. But the Daltons, they represented everything rotten in the company's culture. Tonight, that rot was being illuminated under the brightest light possible. Richard tried again, voice cracking. Mr. Hale, please, I've been with this company for 25 years. A single mistake. Marcus's eyebrow lifted almost imperceptibly. A mistake. Richard's mouth worked silently. He couldn't find footing. Couldn't find words. You didn't make a mistake, Marcus said. You revealed your values. A couple at a nearby table looked away, ashamed. They had laughed earlier when the Daltons dismissed Marcus. Evelyn clasped her hands together nervously. We can apologize publicly if you prefer. Marcus's jaw tightened, the first break in his calm all evening. No. Richard blinked. No. I don't want your apology, Marcus said. I want you to understand what you did. Richard's entire posture sagged. Marcus went on. You didn't take my seat because you were confused. You took it because you assumed a black man in a tuxedo couldn't possibly outrank you. Silence rolled across the ballroom like a thick fog. You assumed I didn't belong, Marcus said, his voice steady, controlled. Even when I showed proof. Evelyn looked at her feet, hands shaking violently now. She hadn't expected to be exposed like this, not in public, not in front of the entire company. Richard tried to salvage something. Mr. Hale, please, I'm asking for a chance to fix. Marcus cut him cleanly. You're not afraid of what you did, he said. You're afraid of consequences. Richard froze. Because it was true. And the entire ballroom knew it. A board member stepped forward then, Martin Graves, a man known for political subtlety. Marcus, Martin said carefully, perhaps we can move this conversation elsewhere. The gala is. Marcus turned toward him. Just one look. And Martin stopped speaking. No, Marcus said, his voice firm but calm. This room watched what happened. It can watch accountability too. People shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The truth stung because they had watched. They had whispered. They had smirked. Marcus stepped a pace closer to the Daltons. I built myself up from nothing, he began, voice lower now, every word heavy. I've waited in rooms where people looked at me the same way you did, with condescension, suspicion, entitlement. Maya felt her breath catch. Marcus continued. But I learned something important. People judge you by what they believe you are, until you show them what you actually are. A hush fell over the room. The Daltons couldn't move. Marcus's eyes locked onto Richard. You looked at me and saw a man beneath you. You dismissed me as staff. You mocked me, and when you were corrected, you doubled down. Richard's face flushed red. His voice cracked weakly. I panicked. It was a bad moment. It was who you are, Marcus said sharply. Those 6 words cracked Richard's composure completely. His eyes glistened. He reached a hand out as if hoping to physically hold on to his position, his reputation, his illusions. Mr. Hale, please don't do this. I have a family, a mortgage, responsibilities. Marcus's expression didn't soften. I'm not firing you, he said. Richard exhaled shakily, knees almost buckling with relief. Yet, Marcus added. The room tensed. Richard's relief died instantly. What happens next will depend on your choices, Marcus said. Richard swallowed hard. Marcus turned his gaze to Evelyn. She froze under the weight of it. You, Marcus said, spread the assumption that I was an outsider, loudly enough for half the room to hear. Evelyn flinched. You set the tone, Marcus continued. Others followed your lead. Evelyn broke then, a tear slipping down her cheek. I am sorry, truly. Don't apologize to me, Marcus said. Apologize to the idea that your behavior contradicts. She looked up, confused. Marcus clarified. Equality. And Evelyn felt the shame twist deeper. At the back of the room, Maya stepped slightly closer, not to intervene, but because something about Marcus's voice drew her in. He wasn't humiliating them. He wasn't reveling in their collapse. He was confronting the system they represented. And somehow, despite all the pressure, despite all the eyes locked on him, he remained calm. Controlled. Righteous. Marcus stepped back, addressing the whole ballroom now. Tonight, many of you watched what happened and said nothing. Those sitting closest lowered their eyes. It takes more than silence to create a respectful culture, he said. It takes courage. The last word landed with weight. Maya felt it deep in her chest. And tonight, Marcus continued, one person showed courage. Maya froze. He couldn't mean. Marcus turned toward her again, eyes warm. Maya Thompson, he said, you didn't know who I was, you didn't know what I owned. You simply saw a human being treated unfairly, and you stood up. Maya's breath hitched. The entire ballroom turned to face her. Marcus went on. You showed more integrity as a server than some executives showed in their entire careers. Several executives winced. Richard visibly shrank. Evelyn covered her mouth in silent despair. Marcus stepped closer to Maya, respectful, measured. You reminded me, he said softly, why I built this company in the first place. Maya blinked back tears. She wasn't used to being recognized like this. Not for kindness. Not for courage. Not by someone like him. Marcus turned back to the crowd. I want to make one thing clear, he said, standing tall. This company will not be led by entitlement. It will not be run by assumption. It will not reward arrogance. He paused, letting the words settle like concrete. From tonight forward, this company will operate under one guiding principle. We treat people with dignity, not because of their title, but because they are people. Applause erupted, genuine, emotional, cathartic. Even those who earlier whispered against him now clapped, almost grateful he had spoken a truth they couldn't. The Daltons didn't clap. They sat broken at their table, pale, exposed, and terrified of tomorrow. Marcus stepped away from the center of the room, exhaling softly. The burden he'd carried all night finally loosened. The truth was out. The room had changed. The masks had shattered. And the power had shifted. Not to wealth, not to title, but to integrity. The storm of the gala had reached its peak. Now came the aftermath. The storm settles, the truth heals, and the choices of one night change every life in the room. The applause faded slowly, like the last waves of a storm pulling back from the shore. Guests exhaled, shoulders lowering, tension unwinding from their bodies. But the air was still charged, heavy with reflection, guilt, humility, and something few expected when the evening began. Hope. Marcus stepped off the center floor, finally moving away from the spotlight. For the first time that night, he looked tired. Not defeated, just human. Like a man who had carried the weight of an entire company's conscience on his shoulders, and now finally set it down. As he walked back toward the quieter end of the ballroom, people parted to make space for him, not out of fear, but respect. Some executives murmured apologies under their breath, unable to meet his eyes. Some guests nodded silently. Others simply watched him, faces filled with revelation. But one person moved toward him. Maya. She still held her drink tray against her hip, but her steps were slow, deliberate, as if she wasn't sure whether she had the right to approach him now that she knew who he truly was. Marcus noticed her hesitation and stopped. "You can come closer," he said gently. Maya exhaled, relief softening her shoulders. "I wanted to say something, but I don't even know where to start." "Then start with what you feel," Marcus said, "not what you think you should say." She hesitated, then found the courage. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for how they treated you." Marcus shook his head softly. "You didn't treat me that way. You don't owe me an apology." "But I still feel ashamed," Maya admitted. "I'm used to seeing people like me ignored, overlooked, treated like we're invisible, but seeing it happen to someone like you, someone who didn't deserve it, it hit different." Marcus studied her expression. "You speak as if being overlooked is normal." She let out a humorless smile. "For people like me? Yeah, kindness feels like a luxury. Respect feels like something we have to earn more than others." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood. "Perhaps too well." "Maya," he said softly, "you stood up in a room full of people who refused to. That isn't normal. That's extraordinary." Her eyes shimmered. "You don't know what that means to hear." "I do," Marcus replied, voice low, "more than you think." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was grounding, human. Then Maya asked the question that had lingered all night. "Why didn't you say who you were earlier?" Marcus exhaled deeply. "I wanted to see the truth," he said. "The truth about the culture I inherited, the truth about the people making decisions, the truth about how strangers treat a man who has nothing to prove." "And what did you see?" Maya whispered. Marcus looked out across the ballroom, toward the guests avoiding eye contact, toward the Daltons frozen in silent dread, toward Mrs. Kensington trying to maintain composure. "I saw exactly what I needed to see," he said. Maya nodded, and somehow she felt lighter. Across the room, Richard Dalton sat with his face buried in his hands. Evelyn leaned toward him, voice shaking. "What do we do?" Richard looked up at her, eyes hollow. "I don't know." "We have to say something," she whispered desperately. "We have to fix this." Richard shook his head. "Fixing this isn't up to us anymore." Evelyn's breath hitched. "What do you think he'll do?" Richard's jaw locked. "I think tomorrow decides our lives." Evelyn swallowed hard. For the first time in their marriage, she truly feared losing everything, status, influence, wealth. But more than that, she feared the reflection staring back at her from the ballroom mirrors. A woman who had judged a good man without reason. A woman she didn't like. A woman she didn't want to be anymore. At the stage, Mrs. Kensington approached Marcus again. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "You handled it with grace." Marcus gave a faint smile. "You gave me courage to finally face this head-on." "Nonsense," she whispered. "You had courage long before you walked into this room." Then her voice softened. "How will you handle the Daltons?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked toward them, toward the couple crumbling under the weight of their own actions. Their arrogance had evaporated. Their entitlement had dissolved. All that remained was fear and regret woven so tightly they could hardly separate one from the other. "I don't know yet," Marcus finally said, "but whatever I do, it won't be out of anger." Mrs. Kensington nodded, relieved. "You're a good man, Marcus." He didn't respond. He simply watched the Daltons for another long, silent moment. Later, the gala continued, softer now, more reflective. Conversations were gentler, smiles were smaller. People moved differently, aware of the ground they stood on. Maya returned to her work, but every few minutes someone would stop her. "Good job. You did the right thing. You inspired us." She had never been acknowledged like this before. Every thank you felt like sunlight cracking through a long, heavy sky. At one point, an older woman, one of the donors, stepped forward and gently squeezed Maya's hand. "You reminded us how to be human tonight," she whispered. Maya's throat tightened. "Thank you," she said softly. As the night neared its end, Marcus stepped outside onto the balcony, taking a rare moment alone. The city lights stretched beneath him, a reminder of how far he had come and how far he still had to go. Footsteps sounded behind him. He didn't turn. "You don't have to come out here," he said quietly. "You've done more than enough tonight." Maya stepped beside him. "I wasn't checking on you," she said softly. "I needed air too." They both looked out over the skyline, two very different lives standing on the same balcony, quietly bound by the same truth. Maya glanced at him. "Do you regret coming tonight?" "No," Marcus said. "Tonight gave me clarity." She nodded, absorbing his words. "And what about tomorrow?" she asked. Marcus took a deep breath. "Tomorrow," he said, "is where change begins." She studied his face, tired, thoughtful, but strong. "You're going to fix the company, aren't you?" Marcus turned to her. "No," he said. "I'm going to rebuild it." Maya smiled, small, genuine. "I believe you will." Marcus looked at her, really looked, and something softened in his gaze. "You should be part of that," he said. Maya blinked. "What do you mean?" "You have more integrity than most people I met tonight," Marcus said. "I could use someone like you." Her breath caught. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a place," Marcus said. "A seat earned through character, not privilege." Maya looked away for a moment, eyes stinging with emotion. "I've never had anyone see me like that." Marcus smiled gently. "I do." For a long moment, they stood together, not CEO and server, but two humans who had refused to let the night define them. Inside, the Daltons gathered their things silently. Their world had changed. Their reputation was shattered. Their future uncertain. But something else was beginning to grow inside them, something unfamiliar. Accountability. And perhaps, eventually, humility. By the time the ballroom emptied, Marcus felt the weight lift completely from his shoulders. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need power. He had already won. Because he changed something real. A culture. A belief. A room full of people who would never again judge someone they didn't understand. And as he stepped out of the gala beside Maya, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The story of tonight would not end in humiliation, but transformation. In the end, this story wasn't about a seat at a gala. It was about how easily people forget to see the human being sitting in front of them. How quickly some judge by skin, by clothes, by assumptions, never realizing they're looking down on someone who has climbed mountains they themselves could never survive. The white couple thought they were taking a chair from a man they believed didn't belong. What they didn't know was that they were trying to steal dignity from someone whose entire life was built on holding his dignity together in rooms designed to break him. And when the truth came out, when the man they mistreated stood revealed as the CEO of the very company that paid for their luxury, the world didn't suddenly become kinder. But they changed. They had to, because truth has a way of lifting its head, even in the darkest room. The CEO didn't embarrass them. He didn't humiliate them. He didn't drag them down to the level they tried to drag him. He simply showed them who he was by standing tall, by speaking with grace, by choosing character over anger. And sometimes that's the loudest justice of all. This story reminds us of a simple truth. You never know who you're looking down on. You never know the battles they fought, the scars they hide, the strength they carry. Respect isn't earned through titles, wealth, or status. It's given because we're all human and everyone deserves dignity. If the world learned to pause before assuming, to listen before shaming, to see before judging, we would be living in a kinder place. So the next time you feel tempted to size someone up based on the surface, remember this moment. Remember the couple who grabbed a seat and almost lost everything. Remember the black man who stayed silent until silence became power. Treat people right not because of who they might secretly be, but because of who you should be. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need a reminder today.